For more market insight as we count down to the midterms, let's get to our panel now. Ryan Dietrich is Senior Market Strategist with LPL Financial. Stefanie Miller here with us today is a Senior VP with Height Capital Markets. Good to have you both with us. Ryan, to you first. How much of the weakness that we've seen in the market do you think is any way related to the midterms?
Well, Scott, some of it obviously is. Globally, we clearly have a lot of markets that are pulling back. So the U.S. is pulling back a little bit too. But let's not forget historically, look at 2014, for instance. We had a pretty big pullback in October, a couple days beneath the 200-day moving average, and a really nice rally higher. So, we think that scenario could be playing out. As Dom just talked about, though, this is a really positive seasonality point of view. November and December historically are really strong during midterm years. So once this is out of the way with a lot of those positive fundamentals, we would be very open to probably a really nice end-of-year rally here, as we've kind of had, obviously, a very, very rough October, as we all know.
Stefanie, how do you see it? I mean, you got fears of the Fed, obviously playing into it. You have fears of tariffs. I haven't heard many people other than the president in his tweet today and Larry Kudlow a couple weeks ago on CNBC suggest that the midterms are having much to do with what we've seen in the stock market.
Yeah, I think it's less about what we see now and more about where we project it'll go in the latter half of this year or latter months of this year and the first half of next year. I think more about who wins the midterm elections, which chamber is controlled by which party has a lot to do with where we're headed.
The House, the Democrats winning the House seems to have been priced in for a while. The big wild card clearly is what could happen in the Senate.
Yes, I do agree with that. The one thing that when I talk to investors, institutional investors, that they seem to be missing, though, despite expecting a Democratic Senate, is how hard it might be to vote on this renegotiated NAFTA. And so despite the fact I don't think maybe the day after the election there's going to be a big surprise about what happens, I do think that most investors are not appreciating how hard this is going to be.
So if the Democrats win the House as expected, the Republicans hold on to the Senate, what are some of the outcomes when it comes to key policy pieces? Because that's what the markets are really focused on, things like infrastructure, making tax reform permanent, and the vote on the new NAFTA.
Yeah, so I think there's no scenario where making tax reform permanent, I think, can go this year.
All right, so that's out no matter what.
I think it's out no matter what. I do think on infrastructure, the only scenario where an infrastructure bill could get done is under a divided Congress. I think it's going to require hard choices, and no party wants to own that by themselves. So if you can work together, bipartisan, that's how that's done. I think the vote on USMCA, the renegotiated NAFTA, is going to be a Nancy Pelosi versus Donald Trump showdown, and I could see Trump threatening withdrawal to compel Democrats to vote for this.
Ryan, we want to get this to you here. I mean, we know that the midterms are part of the calculus. We know the historical data around it, as you've pointed out. Is it, though, just noise? Can we look beyond the midterms? Is there anything else that's going to be driving the trade besides the fact that we have this uncertainty over the election in about a week's time?
Well, sure. We'll talk about elections for a second. We had a 9-day losing streak on the S&P 500 ahead of November 2016's election. So weakness ahead of elections is normal. But you talk about what's going on under the surface. Yes, this has been one of the worst months we've seen in a long time. Guys, this could be the first October ever without 2 consecutive up days. Think about that for a second. Now, what's happened this month, though? Earnings. 2019 earnings for the S&P 500 have actually increased so far this month. To us, that's a really good sign. At LPL Research, we still believe earnings drive long-term stock gains. This is a rough month, but earnings are actually getting better when you look at the estimates, and we think that's a good thing.
Yeah, Steph, well, last question to you. I'm told by a former administration official that the market is underestimating the vote on the new NAFTA, if you want to call it that. Do you think so?
Well, I do think that the recent stock market volatility we've seen, clearly investors are saying it's worry about tariffs. I think in Washington, folks are blaming the Fed. So I do think there's a bit of a disconnect. So maybe there is an underestimation about this being an easy vote.
Well, I'm saying as you get into, next year,
yeah,
wouldn't have the vote but this year, that's for sure.
Yeah, there is definitely walking back, holding a vote this year. I think it's very difficult to envision that the process could happen this year. I think the administration is trying to downplay how hard it will be to get this agreement past a Democratic House.
All right, great stuff. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, Stefanie Miller of Height Capital, Ryan Dietrich, LPL Financial.